feedback on that last presentation, and and go over my notes too that I made on that Zillow presentation. I thought it was very interesting. You know, one of the great things about Zillow and companies at large is that they have a lot of stats. You know, usually the stats they give out are the ones that are the most favorable for their company, but nonetheless, they're very helpful for us, the brokers and agents. So really using those, empowering yourselves with those stats is good. So off the cuff, I want this to be kind of an informal meeting. I'll try to have you all out of here before 1 o'clock. So tell me your thoughts from that initial thoughts on that last meeting.
We also slow that down and give yourself more value as partnering with Zillow, I think for 10%, it should be sent out to everybody. I think we need time. So actually, it's like 10 phone calls.
Right. So to Wes's point, you know, Wes was concerned about selling, basically selling to multiple agents and not giving adequate time for an agent to respond. Dave Perry Miller and I have had this conversation a lot about luxury listings, and this is where it really depends on your average price point, because you have to keep in mind the target audience for Zillow is a pretty average consumer with an average price point, which is going to be in the Metroplex 200 to 500,000. So those consumers, especially the younger demographic, and this is also generational, that younger millennial, the demographic that is growing at such a rapid pace right now, they want answers yesterday. So they want it immediately. They're on their phone and they want to get ideally a response as soon as they send that button. So that first agent that responds is generally the agent that's going to have the highest probability of converting that lead, period. So that's just a stat that no one can argue with, and that will continue to grow, and that's the case. So you have to take that in consideration, and then also take in consideration, you have to follow the money. I mean, Zillow's a media company, and they're in the business of generating leads and selling leads. So you have to always take that into consideration, that they're going to sell as many leads as they can possibly sell, and they're going to generate as many leads as they can possibly generate. So the quality of the lead and as far as the exclusivity of the lead are going to be secondary to their bottom line. So that's something else that's important to take into consideration. So though that's a good point that Wes brings up. Any other feedback, comments? I'm going to just kind of run through my notes that I took, which weren't a lot, but a lot of it did confirm things that I kind of study in the industry and that I talk to my peers about as well. So something that, again, no surprise, but one of the first stats he mentioned is 70% of Zillow traffic is mobile. And as you all know, mobile traffic is continuing to grow and grow, and that'll keep growing. So people that are on a mobile device, a lot of times they may start their search online. And we know that the way the consumer works is that they start generally online on their computer. It may be at night, it may be when they have spare time, and then they're going to go drive the neighborhoods and drive to the property. That's when they usually start searching on mobile. So the mobile usually happens after they first go online. But this is something that's changing pretty rapidly. So these are people that are on the streets that are looking at these properties. So 70% of their traffic being mobile, I thought was interesting. Two-thirds, yes.
One thing that I've been doing, and I've been very humble, is I'm interested in how you can share that before you realize that. And you have to have a visible piece directly to me. Like something like Zillow or Realtor.com or wherever. Right here, download this information. It's right here.
Right.
Cold, Zoom, and so then start using it. I said, favorite from there, so I can see what you want.
Right.
That's been very successful.
Good. Conversion has a pretty good app too. Have you compared it to the Conversion app? How do you think they compare?
It's okay. It's okay. And I even have this one I bought Smart Agent last year, and I did not like that at all.
Yeah.
It's all my branding is on it, and it's great. But it's for me to look at the ratings, it's very hard.
NetrisGo has had really good feedback. I've heard good things about NetrisGo, so that's good.
I use it every day.
Okay, good. That's good to
Super
hear.
easy. That's what I was saying, it's not super accurate in terms of sometimes the application, sometimes I can't find a listing on the mobile that I can track their second, but that's fine, so. This is
Yeah, they do take it into consideration. So this kind of, Sarah's comment feeds into the next thing that I wrote down, which is take them off the Zillow platform to your own platform. So this is important, and this is part of what we're going to talk about in my presentation today, is the process of how to take them off of that platform and how to inform and educate them. So informing and educating, that's just part of the buyer sales process, and I want to reiterate that today. The other, I thought it was interesting, the broker and franchise fees is the #1 source of their listings. So I'm curious to get more information on that. 10 plus reviews as a minimum in large markets. So that was another note that I made, is that in a market like DFW, if you have 10 or more reviews, then don't really look to generating much as far as leads on Zillow as a premier agent. The 10 or more reviews is going to be, I think, a benchmark. Just 2 years ago, it was 5 or more reviews. So this is always changing. It's a moving target. Premier agents get featured listing status and protected listings. So he never used the words protected listing, but it's something that is important, is that if you're a premier agent, and this is something that I do, and that if any strong listing agent, I would suggest to do this, is even if you're buying a cheap zip code, but at least you're protecting your listings, because you're going to have your listings with other agents' contact information. And there's nothing more frustrating than losing a lead on your own listing. So that is something that's important in that premier agent package. And some of the prices start in the cheaper zip codes, but what I don't, at a lower price than usually your primary zip code. But what I discourage you from doing is depending on that cheap zip code to generate leads. It's not to generate leads on that zip code, and don't focus on a zip code that you don't know. This goes back to our whole training and approach in the Waller Group, is really honing in on a geographic farm and really knowing that market. So you may have to wait before that zip code becomes available in your area, but use it to protect your listings if you have listings that need to be protected. The agents with the most success come solely from lead follow-up. And that's another thing that we're going to talk about later, is lead follow-up. So he mentioned that not once, but 3 different times in his presentation, is that the agents, the leads, the conversion, not the leads, but the conversion, the actual sales come from lead follow-up. 15% minimum per zip code, and up to 76 agents per zip code. It's a lot of money. If they are getting, on average, $325 an agent per month, 76 agents per zip code, that's a lot of money. No wonder they're valued at what they are.
But I think that, whenever I ask people what sites are you on, I hear Zillow, I feel like more than Trulia or Realtor.com.
Right. He said 2/3, now this is their stat, of course, but 2/3 of the consumers search on Zillow versus the competition. And he did have some interesting stats, I thought, at the beginning, that he said 70% of their consumers that are searching on Zillow do not search on Realtor.com and Trulia and their competition. I think that's debatable. That maybe they don't search on their mobile, but maybe they have another search set up on their computer that's with Realtor.com, or vice versa. So it's a really moving.
Yeah, I think the same way. It's like, when I do my searches on the computer, the only thing I see is point is where I have the property and the property.
Right.
That's the only time where I see, I think you're really doing your research. I think that's a more qualified.
Definitely.
Sitting down and they're actually in front of their listings.
That's why sign calls are still the most, other than a personal referral, a sign call is the most motivated, qualified, strongest lead that there is. And the next best thing to a sign call is what? Someone that's in front of that house that's online sending an email. So good feedback. The premiere video, 60 to 90 seconds. I'm looking forward to studying those videos more, to talk to him about the agents that have had the best success with that. I thought that was really interesting, and it kind of reiterates the whole where the industry is going, and video being so important. why is it that you guys think video is important? Why is it consumers are responding to that so well?
The whole entertainment thing is one for that. It's like people watch videos on YouTube, people playing video games as opposed to playing them themselves. I mean, the whole, my generation and younger is very motivated.
So entertaining, it's more entertaining. So that's one.
And they feel like they know you.
Okay,
You're on
bingo.
video, they feel
So
like-
this is, I think Nana has nailed it. And that is, we talk about how relationship selling and buying a home is a relationship-based decision. I mean, the realtor you choose is based generally on the relationship. So people have a stronger connection in a relationship if you're communicating via FaceTime or whether it's a video or when they have that face-to-face. And we also know 70% of communication is face-to-face, right? So versus over the phone or much less an email. So sales being a relationship-based business and direct selling, we're all in the direct sales business, then the video is the next best thing to maybe FaceTime or a face-to-face interaction. So that it helps build and solidify that personal connection. So
You
that,
said it was 4 cents an impression. For the day that the pressing starts, imagine, so that you get, you're not, okay, fine, we'll copy and pretty much across the field. The main idea, okay, 4 cents an impression.
so something that, this is a little off the subject, but something that I think as a brokerage we should look at, and I know we sent out an email, I think last week, as far as videographers and looking for videographers, but to have some personal videos done, and we'll try to help you guys out as far as maybe getting some negotiated pricing or something if we have some personal videos. I do think there's a lot of power in that, and I think he reiterated that today in the results that they're seeing with those Premier Agent videos. So the last note that I took is that top of mind is the note that I took: 43% choose their agent online. So 43% of consumers choose their agent online. And this is a big shift based on NAR stats, which NAR stats still indicate even today that a personal referral is the greatest source of business for agents. So keep in mind, Zillow is buyer driven. So all of the people that are searching on Zillow primarily are buyers, and people that are listing their home are usually a little bit more, I shouldn't say sophisticated, but a bit more experienced. So a personal referral, they're just going to know more people in the industry. They've lived there longer. They've lived there long enough to where a buyer that's relocated or something is totally different. So you have to put that into context as far as the people that are choosing their agent. Most of those are buyers. Okay, so with that being said, any other final comments or feedback before we jump into the Waller Group Referral Network procedures? All right, so I just, some of you have been in the last Referral Network meeting that we have, but we're spending well over $2,000 a month on Realtor.com. We also spend money on Trulia, on Zillow, Homes.com, and we had a Premier Agent showcase and a lot of, pay for a lot of money for our online presence. He touched on a little bit of it this morning on the Zillow presentation about using it in your listing presentations. So that's one of the reasons that as a brokerage, we spend so much money to protect our listings, to make sure the inquiries are going back to you guys as listing agents. That's why we use the pipeline and the 5-street technology. So that way when inquiries come in, then they can be dispatched to you guys as listing agents first, and you have the first opportunity at those inquiries. We want the buyer to have the most accurate information, and as you know, 85% of the buyers go directly to the listing agent or attempt to go to the listing agent. Whether they are or not, that's usually their intent. So that's something to keep in mind. He said the average online conversion rate for Zillow is, I think he said 3%. And that is a pretty true industry stat for all online lead conversion is 3%. Now, with follow-up, that's where 90% of the sales come from lead follow-up. So follow-up is an extremely important component of this. And our lead conversion through Realtor.com, we've been doing it for 2 months now. So we should have enough in our pipeline. With the volume has been good. I'm pleased with the volume of leads that we've seen through Realtor.com. It's much, much more than what we get through Trulia, Zillow, or the others, but we're spending a lot more too. So the reason I could spend just as much with Trulia or with Zillow or with Homes.com, but the reason I spend so much with Realtor.com is because it's only distributed to one other agent. As you saw, 76 agents per zip code with Zillow. So, we're spending a lot more, but we're also getting a higher quality lead that's more exclusive. The content on Realtor.com is also more accurate than Zillow. So Realtor.com, since they have the affiliation with National Association of Realtors, then there is a little bit more integrity to that content, and they're not selling leads that are on properties that are not listed or pre-foreclosures or things that have been there for a year and a half and not on the market. So that lead quality generally, that's a little bit more sophisticated buyer, and they're a little bit more not necessarily motivated, but just better quality. So what's your feedback off the cuff on some of the leads over the last 2 months since we've increased our spend on Realtor.com?
I think what I've noticed with the pipeline leads is that you just have to continue to follow up. It's like your initial contact and connect great, or they're kind of looking, but after time, like you continue to talk to the same person, it eventually pans out. They're not immediate buyers or
Right.
It's like
another stat that I thought he's mentioned that was interesting is he said the average time frame for their sales is 1 to 4 months on Zillow. And I think we could probably say the same for Realtor.com. It's probably 1 to 4 months would be the average time frame. That's still an A buyer, guys. That's a good buyer that we definitely want to work. But as Dana said, it's the lead follow-up's critical. Corey, I think.
Yeah, some of the leads I've gotten, now what you were talking about earlier, you're saying those are like seller leads?
No, most of the leads that we buy to buy seller leads, any company that sells you seller leads, beware, because they're usually going to be inquiries, and they're going to be CMA registrations. So they may be registrations, but I guarantee they're not leads. If they are, let us know about it. That's very valuable. But I would say 90% of these would be buyer leads, with the exception of move-up buyers to where they're going to have a property to sell. So, and that's not something that we identify on the front end if they're a move-up buyer.
I've never had one that was a seller.
Never. Yeah, because people, keep in mind, it's emotional. People that are searching, real estate's an emotional decision. So they're getting their mind around looking for a new house before they start thinking about selling their house. Usually, that's just statistically.
And what makes these leads different? Buyer leads, or buying zip codes from Trulia or Realtor.com?
Spending a lot more money on Realtor.com. So, but as far as the lead being different, there's really not that much difference. So I kind of lump the 4 different media companies into the same category, which is Zillow would be, they're the Goliath. They're the ones that generate the most. And then there's Trulia right beside them. Now that they're owned by the same company, they're probably going to be side by side. And then there's Realtor.com, and then there's Homes.com. Homes.com has really slid from what I've seen as far as their quality and their the lead quantity as well. Zillow, there's a big quantity, but they rape the agent for every dollar that they can, and they dilute those leads as much as they. I mean, it's a billion-dollar, multi-billion-dollar company. They've figured it out as far as how to sell these leads, but they do a great job of capturing them too. And then Trulia, I put them right there in the same category. And then Realtor.com is the one that the reason we spend the most with them is because it's not sold to as many, and the quality is a little bit better. So it's kind of like splitting hairs when you're among these top 4. But Realtor.com is where and this changes. Among the top 4 lead generation media companies, they roll out different programs at different times of the year. So I may be having another meeting in 6 weeks, and we may all be with Trulia because they rolled out something different that gives them a competitive advantage. So they're very highly competitive, and Homes.com is really losing market share. So I would say it's now that Rupert Murdoch owns Realtor.com, Realtor.com it'll probably, the competition between Zillow, Trulia, and Realtor.com is going to be fierce. I guarantee it here in the next 12 to 18 months. So that's something that we'll, as a company and as you guys as agents, should always be looking at. You know, that as agents, 10 years ago, you could say 5 to 10% of the marketing budgets with a lot of brokerages was spent on newspaper ads. You know, now that's on Zillow, Trulia, Homes.com. So those broker feeds from the top franchises, like you said, that's the #1 source of their listings. So it's a interesting business. Okay, so the way the lead is handled, and to Sarah's point, taking them from the Zillow or these 4 media companies that are just selling, you know, if they stay on there, then these are people that want immediate gratification. So if they're looking at another property 2 weeks from now, who do you think they're going to click? It's going to be the agent in front of them. It's not going to be one of us. So that's why you want to be able to pull them off that platform if possible and put them on your own search. So you have to give them a reason to do that. You know, if they don't have a reason to not do what's easy, and Zillow's pretty easy, they make it pretty easy, then there has to be, so #1, more inventory. Are you offering them more inventory through Netris? So the more inventory is that is the call to action for any consumer, is that they want to talk to that listing agent and they want more inventory. So you can't always offer them more inventory. If you're really focusing on your geographic farm and these happen to be in your geographic farm, then if the stars align, then yeah, you'll have more inventory. But for the most part, it's going to be through how quickly they get that information, because the Zillow feeds, unless it's a brokerage feed, it's not always going to be that quick. So List Hub, some of these don't refresh as much. The Netris Go will probably be the fastest way for them to get that information. So when you're talking to these leads and you have pacified them on their initial request, you know, at first they just want to look at that house, or they just want to get their question answered on that property that they inquired about, then the next phase of the process for you is, in order to capture that lead, not only to follow up with them, but also put them in the MLS gateway search. So that way they're receiving your searches and they're relying on that more than they're relying on the Zillow searches. They should get those searches more timely. Also using the Netris Go application with that will help them. The Netris search portal is a great portal. You can see when they've been in, when they've logged in last. So use that to build your pipeline, and that should be a part of your pipeline from all the lead generating that you're doing, not just from our referral network. One of the reasons we have the referral network and have it structured the way it is that it's to establish best practices for you on managing your own leads and the leads that you're generating. That's why we spend money on all those 4 companies. You don't have to, so we can gauge best practices, what works, what doesn't work, so that way we can let you know what's the most effective way to handle these. So the buyer counseling session, that is quasi part of a buyer counseling session, is this is how I'm going to find more inventory for you, is that I'm searching for sale by owners. I'm also searching in the area. I know what's in the area because I preview inventory in this area. And I also know, I talk to other top agents in this area, so I work with the top agents and I know what's coming to market. I'm also a member of, whether it's Real Estate Friends Facebook group, the exclusive Facebook group for the LBJ properties that are coming soon. Have that in your preferred buyer agreement that you send that buyer. And you need to have that in writing, not just verbally on that phone call, but also in writing. So that way they're getting it adds credit. Anytime you have something in writing, it's going to add credibility. So your buyer book and having that customized for your buyers in your area, and then also having that preferred buyer agreement that's customized. And I encourage you to keep it to 1 page. And 10 years ago when I was a buyer's agent, I did the same thing. I had my preferred buyer agreement was 1 page. But this buyer 4-page buyer rep agreement, people, it's like a legal document. How many people read legal documents? So that's where the preferred buyer rep agreement gives you kind of a crutch or something to follow, a prop, where you go down, I search all the FSBOs and I'm alerted of the FSBOs that come online. I also preview these properties that are not on the market. So really focus on your value proposition. Our moving boxes, we give you the first 2 hours, first $200 of moving with our preferred moving company. You get moving boxes through us. There's no other company that offers these things. So have that, and that's part of your pitch. That's part of that, needs to be part of those initial conversations with those buyers. That way you're solidifying not just your value proposition, but the brokerage value proposition. But then 90% of those conversions, of course, come from lead follow-up. So they're being bombarded by other agents on that initial phone call. So you may have to tell the same buyer 3 or 4 different times through the process as you're following up with them and reminding them of the free moving boxes that we send to their doorstep, reminding them of the discounted moving services that we provide, reminding them of, X number of for sale by owners that you previewed this week that may work for them, reminding them of what you're doing on their behalf to find more inventory. So there's a lot of things that you can be doing, but you have to constantly remind them of what you're doing to expect that buyer to convert. Conversion also has some good training. I'm not a big fan of the templated autoresponders in conversion. You have to go in and customize those to your preferences based on your buyers. But conversion does have great training. So every one of you should listen to those training videos on conversion, because one of the points that they make, one of the primary points that they make, is creating obligation with that consumer. Are you making that consumer feel obligated to use you? Power of guilt is pretty powerful. So, if they know you're out there looking at for sale by owners and you call them and say, hey, I looked at this property, it's not going to work for you, but I just thought about you because I just finished walking through it. Or here's a video of a property that I thought may work for you. That's creating more and more obligation. That's solidifying further and further your relationship with that buyer. So that's an important part of the conversion process. And we know this is a face-to-face business. It's a direct sales business. So getting in front of that buyer, that's why setting that appointment needs to be the #1 goal when you talk to that consumer. And I would have autoresponders. I would have whatever it takes. If you're calling at 11 o'clock at night, if that's when that lead comes in, to set that appointment. Because keep in mind, once they have set that appointment, they're obligated, right? I mean, they don't want to just stand you up. I mean, if they're a decent human being, they're not going to just stand you up at that property because another agent calls and offers to give them information or offers them to put them on a search or whatever. They've already, they may not have signed the document or signed an offer, but they're obligated if they've set that appointment. These are tentative appointments. These appointments can change based on their loan approval, based on the spouse being there to make a decision, based on whatever contingencies that we want to add in there. But the #1 goal needs to be setting that appointment. And this is debatable with the conversion training. Conversion would say, well, these leads on conversion, when you listen to their training, they'll say, well, these are way upstream. If your goal is to set an appointment, then you're being too aggressive with these leads. And that's probably the case with conversion. If they've been on your website, or maybe they saw a Facebook promoted post, but keep in mind, you're not competing with 10 other agents on conversion. These Zillow leads and Realtor.com leads, different. You're competing with multiple agents on this. So it's the first one that crosses the finish line that wins. So you have to make sure that you're not only fast at responding to those, but you're also setting that appointment. Because if the agent calls you right behind you and they are 5 minutes later, but they set the appointment, you could have had a great conversation with them, but who do you think you're obligated to? So that's why setting the appointment is so important when you're competing for these leads like we are with Realtor.com. So that's, if there's any point that I can make here today, then that would be it. And that is the one thing that should really improve on our lead conversion, is making sure that appointment is set. Now, why is it that you would not set an appointment? Okay. So, any other reasons why you wouldn't set an appointment? To me, there is no reason why you wouldn't set an appointment. And this is an important takeaway here. This is an important point that I want to make, is that setting the appointment is the number one thing that's important, because then they're obligated and you have a time. You've got something to motivate them to get pre-approved. They need to talk to your lender before you can attend the appointment.
That's what I meant.
Okay,
Like,
so setting the appointment and attending the appointment are two different things here. And that's a real important point that I want to make, is that you want to create the obligation, you want to create the commitment by setting the appointment. But you don't want to spend your time, because that's all we have as realtors is time, attending the appointment. Setting the appointment doesn't take any time. It's a 20 seconds on the phone. I mean, you've heard me tell the story probably a dozen times, but my friend Aaron Kerman in Beverly Hills, I'm sitting in his office and he gets a $12 million property call, and he asked the guy, and you want to see it or not? Clink. The guy didn't want to see it. So he's not going to waste his time unless someone wants to book an appointment. So this is a real important, that was 5 years ago, but it's a takeaway I still think about it. And whether it's Mike Ferry or anyone in the business, then they'll tell you, set the appointment. Attending the appointment, that's a totally different element of time that it takes. So that's where you want to make sure they're approved. You want to remove the contingencies and the objections, research other properties in the area before you attend the appointment. And then if they haven't had a time to talk to the lender, or if you're not comfortable, and this is where you guys are licensed salespeople, you're commission, paid on commission, so your time is going to vary. There's no way we could build in enough rules or logic into how to handle that. That's your decision as far as whether you reschedule it or whether you go on that appointment or not. But the thing that's not your decision, really, that is part of our referral network process, is setting the appointment. So you must set these appointments, and whether you attend them or not, that like I said, needs to be on a case-by-case basis, depending on loan pre-qualification and depending on their comfort level. Sometimes it's as simple as the sales price. If it's a $120,000 lead, or if it's a $400,000 lead. So that's where you guys are good enough to understand how to differentiate that. Or if you're driving, 30 minutes to the appointment versus 5 minutes around the corner. That's one of the reasons as a brokerage we try to assign these and try to send these to you in your geographic area or as close to your geographic area as possible. And that's not always doable, but the Realtor.com leads are all in Dallas County. And that's another thing that Zillow, we've spent a lot of money with Zillow in the past. And what's happened is that we get the unbranded listing leads, which are these podunk brokers that are out in the middle of nowhere in Ennis, Texas, or areas I see agents do the same thing. They'll spend money on Zillow status and get leads that are completely not just outside of their city, but outside of their entire county. So that's the other thing we are with Realtor.com. The reason I'm spending the money there is I know they are at least in Dallas County. So
What's the best way to let a buyer down? Get an appointment.
okay, great question. So yeah, that again is going to vary on sales price, but I would just, if they're an approved buyer and they have cash in place, then
I'll usually err on the side of going as opposed to not going, but it's so easy to make the mistake of wasting your time. I'm kind of in that situation where I set an appointment and I'm following up with them and they're just not really responding to me that I want to. What do you think is an elegant way to say, you really haven't fulfilled your end of the bargain, Mr. Buyer, and I have to cancel this appointment? What's the most elegant? Is there a term phrase or something? I find that
Where you're gonna buy, that one might help. Where you're gonna buy and what.
Something that I know I've personally asked many times is, when I show you this property and if it meets your criteria, then are you prepared to make an offer at the property? Are are you bringing your checkbook, basically? Can you write a check for the earnest money today? Can you write a check for the option money today? This is a competitive market, and good buyers will know that. And if they waffle and if they say no, then I wouldn't waste my time. But if they say yes, then I'd find a way to be there.
Yeah, I mean, that's honestly a lot more aggressive than I am with these buyers. A lot of people, I think, are just kind of, starting the process and they want to kind of, want somebody to kind of hold their hand and explain everything as opposed to say.
Oh, I'm glad you brought that up.
5 minutes after
Yeah, well, actually, I'm glad you brought that up because that isn't, I know, just as, if I have someone that calls on a property and I'm not available to assign it to somewhere, that's the first thing that I ask is, if I show you this property, then, and if it meets your criteria, are you prepared to move forward with an offer on, Tuesday at 3:00? It's no different than a listing appointment. If you're comfortable with everything that I have to say, are you prepared to sign the listing agreement Tuesday at 5:00 when I come to meet with you?
So I
It's
understand,
just following the script.
I understand the listing part. Help me a little bit with this buyer thing. So you take a very aggressive stance with the buyer and they say, talk about the different forms of no and how you respond to that.
Okay.
Really think about what your reason is to say no.
Yeah.
Because
Again, it's no different. It's no different than the listing side. You're going to flush out the objections right then. Well, my wife, needs to be with me and I need her before I can make a decision. Or, well, my dad is actually giving me my down payment. So, you could never, just like on a listing appointment, you could never be able to figure out every objection that you have to ask it before you flush out the objections.
On a listing appointment, this is somebody who has a house that they want to sell and they have a life plan that they want me to help them, some goal to achieve. The most common objection that I get when I'm dealing with buyers is that they are, like you said, it's about follow-up in about 1 to 4 months. And I'll work with someone for 4 months. It's kind of separating the two. We're just at the start of the process. Because at the start of the process, yeah, they're not going to do right the first house that I show them.
Okay, so this is something you don't know until you ask. So, but it's, in this market, it's easier to ask, it should be easier to ask that question than ever before, is that if they're not prepared to write an offer when you show that property Tuesday at 6:00, then what do they need to do to be prepared? Well, I need my wife. Well, keep in mind, in this market, we're seeing multiple offers. This was just listed yesterday, and there's a good chance that they have multiple offers. You call the listing agent. I have 2 offers that just came in on it. So that way you're ahead of the game and you're preparing them up front before they even look at that house. Because the mistake is you get out there and then you call the listing agent. Oh, we have 2 offers on it. Well, let me think about it. You're screwed. So all you have to do is ask that question. Are you prepared to make an offer if this house is comfortable, if it meets, if this meets the needs what you're looking for? Well, actually, we're just getting started and we're in a lease until September. Well, would you have known that otherwise? I mean, so that's why you have to ask the question.
I get that all the time. We're in a lease until September.
I'm not going to show you the house, but that's different.
Hold on a second.
I'm talking about me. That's.
I feel like I'm getting one message is very aggressive message, and then the other message is follow up at the time frame is 1 to 4 months. That's showing a few.
Well, Zillow's just giving you an average. I mean, that's that person that's in the lease until September. That's what hurts their numbers. But
Sure.
that's where it's up to you. But I guarantee you really need to be asking that question if at all you are thinking about, if you don't feel like they're willing to make a decision when you attend that appointment.
Wasted hours on buyers. So I'm obviously screwing up.
But I'm not talking out of both sides of my mouth. We're talking about two different situations here. We're talking about, your question was, when do you say no to attending an appointment? But I want to make sure that I'm speaking in regards to converting this buyer to a sale. And this also goes along with what he said earlier, which is solidifying that relationship, and your goal is to solidify that relationship generally with an online lead, is that you've got to solidify that relationship. And normally the only way to do that is on that first property showing. Usually, ideal situation to come to the office, go through the bar counseling session, but how often does that happen? I mean, that normally it's at that property, but you still have to facilitate that bar counseling session at that property. And that's usually where you earn that trust. And since the communication is face to face, then that's going to really further you in converting that sale. Now, if you have another list, if you've got a listing appointment that conflicts with that time and it's a $1 million listing, then yeah, I'd probably reschedule it, or I would I'd massage that. But that there again, that's up to you.
But it's not necessarily a mistake to go and meet someone on property, but they're just starting the process.
No, I would highly encourage it. I mean, but it's not my time, I'm not sitting in your spot. It's not my time that's going out there. So that's where, I'm talking about our referral network process. You are required to book the appointment. I'm not saying you're required to attend the appointment, but that's where you need to use your skill and your experience on whether to attend that appointment or not. And if they're in a lease until September, and this is a $500,000 great buyer lead, it's in your area that that you work, that you have expertise in that geographic area, then yeah, I would attend that appointment and I would really work on solidifying that relationship. But that's where it's going to vary.
I was gonna say for that situation, there's two things that I would do. I asked them, are you ready to break your lease? Like, some people already researched if they're ready to break their lease, if they do find something. And then also what Logan said is, I'll be in front of them, even if they have 6 months out, because I know what I'm talking about, and I'm looking at a certain way, and okay, you understand the whole buying process. So at least give them at the very beginning, and people who already own it, but fresh new people, they are like, they'll let you know, well, I'm kind of in the beginning, I don't really know. So I just want buyer counseling session, either at that house if it's vacant, or try to do a buyer counseling session. We'll go see it and then schedule time right after. So now I'm their contact and just keep up with them through text. If they're younger couple, and keep up with them through text. And then I'll say to them, probably, I saw something like, even though they're still in their lease, I might say, this is something you might want to see, just to keep them in that. But people have, a lot of people already researched what it takes to break the lease.
Yeah.
And Nina, didn't you give a talk a couple weeks ago on buying your first home, or on buying?
It was just in real estate in general.
Yeah. Well, did it kind of follow along the lines of a buyer counseling session?
No, the people there were older than me. So a lot of people already owned their home.
Yeah.
So I didn't have to go through how to buy it.
Well, the point that I was hoping to make is that if you can teach something, if you can teach a home buyer counseling session, then it really is empowering and it really helps you with your own value proposition. So I would encourage each of you to really, on your buyer counseling session and your preferred buyer agreements, really focus on all the value that you can provide and having everything written down, so that way you can teach that, and you're like a evangelist talking about all the things that you do for buyers. Because until you understand your own value proposition and how much value you bring to the table in a transaction, you won't be able to get the buyers to understand either. Otherwise, the buyers just think that you open the door for them and you're the person that they have to call, unfortunately, to get into that house. They really don't want to deal with a realtor. So this is a huge shift that's going on in the industry right now. And this is another important point. This would be the last point that I make, and I'll let you guys go. But important point in this class is that a lot of people are searching online now. And so, like you said, 43% choose their agent online. They don't understand what their agent does. They think, for all they know, they're contacting the listing agent to go look at this house. They don't understand the questions to ask. They don't understand what it takes to get a transaction negotiated and closed. And that's where our referral network and these online leads and any lead generation activities, it simply gives you the opportunity to then explain your value proposition and explain all the intricacies and everything that's involved in making this transaction close between the inspector and the termite inspector and the appraiser and the surveyor and the title company and the lender and the underwriter and the brokerage. And there's a lot of components here, and here's a flow chart of all these people, and this is everything that has to happen in this order. And then if this happens, this doesn't happen. And it's overwhelming to people. People don't understand that when they just think, oh, realtors open the door. I don't need a realtor. It's your job to completely diffuse that perception that these online consumers have, because I guarantee that's a big part of the perception that online consumers have, is that the realtor just gets in the way and they call me and bombard me when I want to look at a property, but yet they don't give me any other information. And I honestly, sadly, I think a lot of realtors feel the same way, that they want to get in and open the door for someone and let them in a house and write an offer, but they don't educate them. And I think Nana's feedback and comments were really important about that process and explaining the process. That way you're defending your value proposition, and that also solidifies lead conversion as well. Okay, any other final questions, comments, feedback? I appreciate you guys attending this, and I think doing both of these back to back, I know they're helpful for me, so hopefully it was for you too.
I'd really like to explore that phrase that you said, that are you prepared to bring your checkbook and write a check at the property, maybe some type of script back and forth, like I'm going to use the whole way for the listing, maybe something like how a buyer lead was supposed to go, with someone who maybe doesn't.
Okay. Yeah.
A different way to say that would be, this property is very high, I've always spoken to a listing agent. Are you in a position to where we see the property and you like it? Are you able to, put a option money down or something?
It's kind of, I've done a softer version of that. And,
I mean, really, the bottom line is, if you know your listing scripts and if you are strong with your listing scripts, this buyer stuff just comes naturally. I never even studied buyer scripts. It's just that rolled off my tongue naturally when I used to pick up property calls on my listings. If you're comfortable with this, then are you prepared to write an offer on it, or let me write an offer on it and represent you? That's another question. Are you going to allow me to represent you on this transaction? And that's, well, I've got a realtor I've been working with, or I feel bad for my realtor because, well, I'm happy to pay them a referral fee. How long have you been working with that realtor? You can start peeling the onion and finding out, but you want to diffuse all those objections before you attend that appointment. Because like I said, if you go to the appointment, it's like going to a listing appointment unprepared or without asking that question. Are you prepared to sign the listing when I come out Tuesday, Wednesday at 5 o'clock? You're screwed. So make sure that if there's any question you ask, are you prepared to write an offer? Because that's when you find out about the lease and about all these other things. So what was the other? There was another question I think that.
I think also preparing, I tell them in advance what the market looks like. Days on market is 2 days, 3 days.
Right.
I give up, I said, this is how we're going to be competitive. No closing. In a buyer counseling session, I let them know, this is what we're going to have to do to win if we're going after a hot home. Like everything in the neighborhood has been done within 6 days or 2 days versus multiple offers. I let them know that you're probably going to have to go over this. I let them know everything. So when we get there, I don't like to be surprised, but I don't like them to be surprised.
Yes, like on a listing appointment, they should be ready to sign the documents when you walk in the door. You should have prepared your buyer enough by the time you show them that property that they're ready to sign the offer. So asking that question will bring up those objections. And keep in mind, a lot of consumers, it's about expectation. Their expectations have to be put in line. So maybe their friend looked at 20 houses before they made a decision. Well, that was 5 years ago and you're good. Now this is the market. This is the expectation that I'm setting. So, and also always keep in mind, people remember stories. So telling them stories about, well, I don't want to get to the house and then you like it and we have 5 offers on it. I want you to be prepared to make an offer when we get there, because that's how quick the market's moving. So to Nina's comment, that's really good, and it goes back to flushing out that objection up front so you can prepare them for an accurate expectation. Okay.
Okay, but what do you do when they say, well, no, you asked them that question and say, well, no, because we're really not ready to move for about 6 months, we're just out there looking. What do? You don't want to waste your time, but you just want to go on an appointment.
That's right. No, right. Good question. So that's where I would dig a little bit deeper. Well, if we found you know, if this happens to be the perfect house, you know, in 6 months, prices, if we just look at how prices have increased in the last 6 months, and now with the spring market coming on, spring market's going to command a 3 to 4% premium. People wait to the spring to sell because they know they're going to get more money, right? So right now in February and March, we've got comps from last summer that people are looking at, where in the spring, they're going to want to push their pricing up. So do you really want to pay 3 to 5% more? I mean, if this is the right house, I just don't, and what I don't want to happen, again, you're going to tell a story, what I don't want to happen is that this be a house that meets your expectations and your criteria, but because you want to compare with others, then we lose it and we can't duplicate it. And that happens more and more in this market when prices are moving up at 3, 4% a quarter, depending on the neighborhood, than they ever have before. So I would feel really bad if I get there and this is the right house for you, and yet we can't find it again. And so another thing that your job as a realtor to do, in addition to setting their expectation, is also mitigating their risk, reducing their risk. So the other question would be, why wouldn't you want to write an offer on it? Why wouldn't you want to move forward with this house? And so, I mean, $150 option check or $200 option fee, I mean, that's nothing in the grand scheme of things to get you the house that you want to live in, to where if we lose it, you know, you're going to pay, you could pay as much as when this one does go under contract, and they're, by the way, they have another offer on already and they're expecting 2 more, then what do you think the neighbor's going to do when they see that this one sold so fast? You know, when that does come on the spring, it'll be 3 to 5% higher. You know, they'll probably get that because of the way the market's been moving. Are you comfortable with that? So that's where you have to ask them that you want that buyer to tell you. I mean, that's sales one-on-one. You want the buyer to tell you where that conversation needs to go, but you have to ask them the right questions, leading questions, to make sure that that happens. And by telling stories of other situations and educating them, educate and inform, you know, that's part of our buyer counseling session in the process. As you're educating and informing on the market and illustrating, you've got to illustrate, and it may take, and this is where if you ask the question up front, then you know you've got to do your homework and find the stats and show them how the market's going up. But if they just say, oh yeah, I'm comfortable with it, I've been looking for 6 months now and this meets our criteria and our specifications, you don't have to do that. But at least you know what kind of homework, it's just like a listing appointment, what kind of homework you have to do before you go out on that appointment. So other feedback, questions? Any other reason that you, so Angela, can you guys think of any other things that come up as far as role play, or that you would not want to show a buyer, or that you would, about the lease, breaking the lease? That's good feedback. You know, asking that there again, you get to ask that on the phone before you get to that property. So
right now I'm working with a son who wants, his mother and mom is in Houston, and he wants to see the properties prior to that. So I don't know.
yeah, that's great. You know, that's fantastic. And in Texas, we're lucky because we have an option period. So that way we negotiate that option period between 7 and 10 days. He can terminate if he just doesn't feel well on day 9. You know, $150 all it cost him. Now, are you going to go out and show that property if he's not willing to make an offer on that and the parents looking at it? No, I probably wouldn't. So, you know, I want to make sure that you're committed to writing an offer on this. You know, it's worst case scenario, it costs you $150 if you decide to terminate the contract. But otherwise, if we're going to be waiting on your parents to come and look at these properties and there again, now you know how much homework you need to do, how quickly are the properties moving, how long has this property been on the market? You know, talk to the listing agent. Have they had other offers? Is he expecting an offer? You know, you've got a much better sense on the homework that you need to do. Okay. All right, guys, I'll let you get to lunch. Thank you for your attention.